So find the function for the following. So I'll make this one quick. I'll use the what you guys call the guess method. So with this, you don't have to go through the formula, the x1, the y2, the c, the m, among other things. You just have to observe the pattern. So when you look at this, check if there is a number that is being added or being subtracted or being multiplied. So that number can be a positive number, or it can be a negative number, which is more like subtracting, or you may be they may be multiplying the x values by that given number. So when you look at these, of course, when you look at 2 and being mapped to -4, you can tell that this is definitely not multiplication, because 2 times -2 times 2, that's 4. But when you try to use the 2 here, it will not work, because -1 multiplied by 2 is not 3. So you try something else. Let's try addition. So for you to get -4 from -2, it means a 2 is being subtracted, because when you have the same signs, you add and maintain the sign. So now let's see if the same -2 will work on the second pair of coordinates, or maybe ordered pairs. So when you add, or maybe when you subtract a 2 from -1, you have a 3, this is true. You subtract a 2 from 0, you have -2, so this is true. You subtract a 2 from 1, you have -1. So that means the pattern here is from x, this is your x, subtract a 2 to get a y. This is your input, and then this is what the equation is doing, and then this is your output. So in other words, you have x minus 2 is y, and you're done. But it's better to leave your final answer in this form. You make y the subject of the formula. So I've just swapped. Instead of putting the y this side, I've decided to put it this side. So this is your equation. And then when x, so I think I meant to say find x when y is -9. So where there is y, put -9, and then you have this. So you can just take this one to the other side, so that you have 2 minus 9 is x, and then this and this will give us -7. So that means your x is -7. And then the next one, in the next problem, we've been given an x or y plane. This is the x-axis, this is the y-axis. So you can just write this in this form. So you have 1 point there, this is 0, 0. In short, 0 is being mapped to 0. And then you also have this point. So avoid picking coordinates like this. So you can just pick something like 1, 2. Avoid fractions in this case. So you have 1, 2. So 1 is being mapped to 2. Remember, these are your x's and these are your y's. Next, we have this point here. You can say 2 is being mapped to 4. So 2 to 4. And then 3 to 6. 3 to 6. So now you can see that from 0 to 0, 1 to 2, 2 to 4, 3 to 6, the moment you try to add something, it won't even make sense, because as you can see here, when you add something to 0, you expect to get a different number other than a 0. So that means they are multiplying by a certain number, because when you have 0 being mapped to 0, it's definitely not addition. There is no way you can add a number other than 0 to 0 to get a 0. So this has to be multiplication or division. This one is rare. So let's try to find the number they are multiplying by. So you can just use any of the other pairs. So you have 1 to 2. Obviously, they are multiplying 1 by 2 to get this. And then let's try to multiply this by 2. 2 by 2, you have a 4. 3 by 2, you have a 6. So the pattern here is x multiplied by 3 is y. In other words, x multiplied by 3 is y. Or this times this is 3x is equal to y. So actually, it's 2, not 3. So we are multiplying by 2. So this times 2 is for this times yes. So we have a 2 there. So that means we have y is equal to 2x. That's our pattern for part B. And then find x when y is 100. So the pattern is y is equal to 2x. So when y is 100, I think it's supposed to be 99. When y is 99, and then it's actually 100. So when y is 100, you can do this. So to solve for x, you can simply divide both sides by 2, so that your x is 50, or x is 50 like this, and you're done. And then on part C we have the same thing, except that the data has been presented in table form. So we have -4 being mapped to -2. We have -2 being mapped to 0, b to 2, 2 to 4, 4 to 6. So when you take a close look at these numbers and then you start with addition, let's see if addition will work. Which number can you add to -4 to get this? That would be a 2, because -4 plus 2, this will be -2. Let's try to do the same thing. Okay, that was easy. Yes, addition is the correct pattern. Let's add the 2 to 2. That's a 4. We add the 2 to this. That's a 6. So this was easy. They're just adding a 2 to each of these numbers. So that means your pattern is to x, add a 2, and then you get your y. In other words, y is equal to x plus 2 is your function, and you're done. And then find the value of b. So b here is being mapped to 2. So this is like your x, this is your y. So in other words, they're saying find x when y is 2. So where there is y, just put your 2. And then where there is x, put your b, like this. Then you can take your 2 to the other side, so that this minus this is 0. Therefore, b is 0. And then lastly, we have another one. So in this case, the data has been presented in coordinate form as ordered pairs. So we have -1 being mapped to -3, 0 being mapped to 0, 1 being mapped to 3, 2 being mapped to 6. So now, let's start with multiplication. So from this, now let's start with addition. Let's say we have minus 1 being mapped to minus 3. So in order for you to move from the input to the output, you have to subtract something like this, right? So you can say minus 1 minus 2, you have minus 3. But you try to do the same thing here, it won't work. So that means this is not our guy. So let's try multiplication now. In most cases, it's one of these two. So let's say we try to multiply this by some number that will give us a 3. So obviously that number is a 3, because minus 1 multiplied by 3 is minus 3. We try to do the same thing here. 0 multiplied by 3, you have a 0. This multiplied by 3, you have a 3. 2 multiplied by 3, you have a 6. So that means we have x being multiplied by 3 is y. In other words, y is 3x. And then, so this is our function. Lastly, if x is 30, find x. If y is 30, find x. So where you have y, just substitute your 30, and then you have 3x. To solve for x, you can simply divide both sides by 3, and you are done. So x is 30. So you can just try to solve these 3 problems. The first one has a mapping, this one, this, and then that.